Thank you, everyone. Nice to see Pupuru sir, Pramod sir, and Dogra sir, all the doyens in the field of vitreoretina. I would like to share my screen here. Come and I would like to at the initial inset I would like to thank AIOS and Dr. Santosh Honavar sir for giving this opportunity. So I have broadly divided it like this: what's new in retina in the postgraduate point of view. Either it can be a diagnostic and therapeutic, and non-surgical and surgical. So let's quickly move on to, so why do we need OCT? Yes, definitely the principle of OCT, its recent advances has been frequently asked question for most of the postgraduates here. We all know it depends on the time domain or the frequency domain. Now we have the subsource OCT also. So it's basically based on the principle of Michelson's interferometry. And we all know that it's a superluminescent diode light source which goes to the reference mirror and it keeps moving back and forth. That's the disadvantage because the image acquisition is not faster. However, with the Fourier domain, it goes into the Fourier transformation where the reference mirror is fixed, and that's how it makes the Fourier domain look more better than as compared to the time domain. Now we have swept source OCT, which is also called as the short cavity swept laser. So it can go around 1 lakh to 1,20,000 A scans obtained per second. So the imaging of the deeper structure, especially the choroid up till the sclera, is possible. So coming to OCT angiography, so all the postgraduates needs to know it because it's a non-invasive imaging technique that employs motion contrast imaging to a high resolution volumetric blood flow. Well, why OCTA? Again, it's been asked in the question, OCT angiography, even its algorithm has also been asked. So we have to be thorough in these things. So it's a no dye 3-dimensional scan, and visualization of individual vascular plexus is possible. So the differences between the OCTA and the FA has been listed here. You can see it in the recorded videos. So basically the principle is the functional extension of the OCT that can use to visualize the microvasculature by detecting the motion contrast from flowing blood. Say for example, when the blood flows through the blood vessel, so the time T1 is taken, the second at the same location, the time T2 at the different point of time. So the waves are subtracted, and that is caused by the blood flow. So let me explain it by the picture here, by the video. You see the principle of SSOCT angiography, where you can have a different time frame at the same location when the erythrocytes are moving through in the blood vessel column. Say for example, see T1, T2, T3 and T4. So now you can see the blood vessels moving in the RBCs moving in the blood vessel, T1, T2, T3 and T4. So this motion contrast composite of these erythrocyte movement is created from these 4 images, and to form a composite are assembled to form an OCTA data cube. And that is how we can beautifully see these neovascular structures in the avascular plexus. So you can see here, these are the before treatment and after treatment. You can see the slight disappearance of these, but again, as the action of the drug wanes, you can see them reverse back. So what's the future? We come out with the SSOCTA, that's the 12 into 12 mm with enhanced field imaging. So the differences of different machines are being again listed out here. Now coming to what is important is the autofluorescence. Autofluorescence we need to know for the postgraduates definitely, because you can see the geographical atrophy here. See, whenever there is increased lipofuscin, and that indicates that the cell is aging and the cell is dying. So this autofluorescence basically tries to detect where there is lipofuscin. And see here, you can see it's a case of geographical atrophy where there is no RP cell loss is there. If there is an atrophy, so it shows an hypoautofluorescence, and whereas the edges still you can see there is hypoautofluorescence. So coming to next, what we have is a wide field imaging. What we have advances in the wide field imaging. Earlier we used to see 30-degree lens, 55 degrees lens, and now we have different players. That's the Optos California and the Heidelberg Spectralis. Definitely the Optos give around 200-degree field of view as said by them. That means it covers nearly 82.5% of the surface area of the retina, whereas the Heidelberg gives around 102-degree single non-steered photograph. So here you can see the photography on the left-hand side and the angiography on the right-hand side of the wide field system. And this is the case of the Coates disease. You can see the periphery, there is a neovascularization here, probably which could have been missed in the conventional angiographic system. So what's new in wide field imaging? You have Optos Monaco, which has the wide field OCT and wide field autofluorescence along with the color fundus photograph, which gives an auto montage up to 220 degrees. So now what's the recent latest is the Optos Silverstone. So what it has, it along with the fundus fluorescein, IR and the choroidal imaging, it also has an ICG. And more interestingly, they have covered the swept source OCT, the wide field swept source OCT in this machine, probably which makes complete all in one. So the RedCam photo documentation, see left hand, you can see a case of ROP, and the right figure, you can see a shaken baby syndrome. Definitely, it's very important for the pediatric retinal imaging, especially in case of ROPs, because it avoids reliance on the human memory. And there are different interchangeable lenses, right, from 30 degrees to 130 degrees. See here, you can see the various field of views. The RedCam, this is one image of for my mentor, Dr. Wai-Ching Lam, taken from the Sick Kids Hospital. And this is how we do the RedCam thing, where it is placed. And definitely you can document at what phase and what stage of ROP this is. And it's a good documentation tool. So coming to the next we have is artificial intelligence. It's a very, very important question all our postgraduate needs to know, because it's the question which is going to appear in the recent advances paper. So how do we divide? It's the machine learning, deep learning, and the neural network. So what is machine learning? It provides computers capability to recognize and understand the patterns and improve its algorithm on its own. See, most of us listen to the music called as Gaana, Netflix, Prime, Amazon Prime Video. If you look into that, it gives you, this is the video which you watched earlier, 85% of it matches. This video you had watched earlier and the present video matches with the previous video to 95%. So you are feeding your interest, and that is how the machine is learning that. And that is how it is able to give you what is your favorite thing. That is machine learning. So what is deep learning? The algorithms can determine on their own if a prediction is accurate or not. Say, for example, when you go into a dark room and you say, switch on the light, it switches on. That is machine learning. When you say that, oh my God, it is so dark, then it switches on the light, then it's deep learning. That means it tries to predict your language. It tries to develop over your algorithms. Now coming to the next is the neural network. So it's a system of hardware or software patterned after the operation of neurons in the human brain. So it's slightly complex next level to the deep learning, where they are notable for being adaptive, which means they can modify themselves as they learn from the initial training, and subsequent runs provide more information about the world. Say, for example, this is the photograph I have, a smartphone. I just take up the retinal photograph, choose a retinal image, either from the camera or from the photo library. AI is computing the diagnosis, and it says that this is a wet ARMD, and it also says how much is confident of it. That is, it's 99% confident or 80% confident. Apart from that, it also lists you what are the differential diagnoses for this disease. So Google, as we all know, has already published it, and its AI uses retinal scans to estimate the heart risk disease. And thanks to our own few institutes in India, which have given a very good feedback to the Google. So role of AI is also used in OCTA. We can take it if there is a time in the next. So there are various things, like it's used mainly for the quantification, auto quantification of the drusen, and also in the different softwares in the case of diabetic retinopathy has been analyzed using this AI. So where all it is used: screening of patients, booking profile, reading images, diagnosis, prognosis, novel treatments, especially in the COVID era, where most of these vaccine manufacturers I was known that they have been using AI in their drug development. So coming to the next, what we have is the anti-VEGF and the steroid. Definitely, it's a very important question. So we need to know the most of the anti-VEGF available in the market. As of now, they are all of VEGF neutralizing activity. So whenever free VEGF is located, is just moving around in the extracellular area, it tries to neutralize that. So that's how we need to do that and look into it. And then we have VEGF trap. That's also another important question which keeps coming in your examination. So what they do here, the R1 receptor, the R2 receptor of the VEGF is taken, and it is just fixed to the monoclonal antibody. So what does the VEGF think? Oh, it's my own receptor. Let me go and stick in there. So ultimately it gets trapped. So that is why it is named as VEGF trap. So you should, if not, you can remember this. It's also called as the decoy receptor. You can remember this example. It's a decoy Air Force One. You don't know where Joe Biden is sitting here. So please remember, have mnemonics so that you can definitely write well in your exams. So coming to the next, what is new in this? You have brolucizumab, which has come into the market, which is of 26 kilodalton, and it has a molarity of around 11 to 13 molecules. So that theoretically, it says that it is more potent than compared to other drugs. And Hawk and Harrier trials have already proven the efficacy of this drug. So what's new about this? There's probably, we are soon to have the ranibizumab port delivery system. That's the refillable wire, which is designed to gradually release the razumab. It's something like having a petrol tank and trying to fill in the petrol and go for a long run. So what's in the knock of the door? You have abicipar pegol, squalane lactate. I have been listening from my MBBS days, but unfortunately it's not proven success. And we are also looking into the erflibercept hydrogel depot, which is still in the clinical trial. There are other ways apart from the intravitreal route. You have the suprachoroidal injection, where the Xipir and the Peach trial have shown that unfortunately few of the trials had to be stopped, but definitely the suprachoroidal route is showing a promising result, especially in non-infectious uveitis. So coming to the next, we have biosimilars. So what is biosimilar? It's a biologic that is highly similar to the reference product with no clinically meaningful differences in terms of safety, purity, or potency. That means if you do a small painting, how similarly you do the next painting. If you do one drug, how similar it is to the another drug. If you do one anti-VEGF, how similar it is to the innovator, either in the form of peptide mapping, amino acid mapping, or it can be due to the primary structure, secondary structure, quaternary structure. So it has to map to the innovator drug. That is what is the biosimilar, and it is growing up very high because of our Prime Minister stressing it more on the generic drugs. So these are the various biosimilars available in the market. And coming to the lasers. So what is laser? You need to know about the micropulse laser. It's something in between the clinically visible scar and the biochemical effect. That is where we have a MPLT. So just to show it, make it easier in the Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry. I think my network went off.
Yeah, it got disconnected, sir.
Where it stopped?
So at the video.
Okay, at the video, I'll just share my screen. I'm really sorry for that. Okay. So here we can see the continuous. Rolika, you're able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here you can see in case of continuous waveform laser, you can see the temperature bar rising on the left. So the heat dissipation to the surrounding structure is more. Whereas in case of these micropulse emission, where the short pulse bursts of lasers are used. So with this, you can see in the left-hand temperature bar, the temperature rises and then comes down again, rises and then comes down again. So that is what is about the micropulse technology, and it's also described as the fovea-friendly laser. So coming to the Navilas. So what is the Navilas? Definitely it's a navigated laser. I just wanted to show it in a small video here. It's where it has now come into the non-contact PRP can also be done. See here, it has a wonderful eye tracking system. You can take the angiographic photos and mark it and ask the Navilas laser to just hit it. See, you are just putting like a Rangoli pattern. You just have to show it where you want to mark it. See, these are the various marks which are available, and you ask them to press one button, it keeps on hitting. It has an excellent eye tracking facility as well. So what's new in this? It's coming with a non-contact PRP. Earlier we had to use the contact lens to do that, but now it's coming with a non-contact, and definitely non-contact wide field PRP is also possible with the Navilas. So what's new is the photobiomodulation. That means it involves the targeted use of selected wavelength of visible to near infrared light produced by a laser on a non-coherent. So especially this is used in case of dry AMD, where it enhances the activity of the enzyme and increases the ATP generation, so leading to a reduction of free radical production or oxidative damage, which usually happens in case of dry AMD. So coming to the next is intraoperative OCT. I'll not go into the detail. You all know that it's an integrated OCT system by the Callisto, basically used in anterior segment surgeries, can be vitromacular traction, macular hole, RD surgeries, or even in case of the lamellar surgeries also. So coming to MIVS, we all know we have evolved from 0.9 mm to 0.4, that is from 20 gauge to 27 gauge. It's reciprocating from 800 cutters to the reciprocating cutters, spring-based, and now we are into the ultra wet, that is the dual pneumatic cutters. So the most important you need to know is the cut rate and the duty cycle. So duty cycle is the amount of time the port remains open for each duty cycle, right? So this is the double pneumatic cutter where air pushes it in and one air takes it out. So it pushes in. So because of this, the cut rate can be increased as against the spring cutters, which has the limitation of the recoiling. So twin duty cycle cutter is nothing but it cuts while going in front and coming back. So theoretically, if it is 8,000, then it has to be 16,000 cuts per minute. See here, you can see twin duty cycle cutter.
With all due respect, with Dr. Srinivas, could you please sum up within the next 30 seconds?
Sorry, madam, there was a disturbance. Just I'll take 1 more minute.
Okay, sir.
So here you can see the hypersonic vitrectomy. So what is hypersonic vitrectomy? It has around 1.7 million cuts per second. So this is how you can see here. This is the guillotine cutter and this is the hypersonic where it liquefies the gel and takes it up. So coming to the next is digitally assisted vitreous surgery. That is how we evolved from bare eye surgeries to microscope, monitor, and then we are, what is the future? It's going to be the heads-free visualization system. So evolved from standard definition, enhanced definition, and now we are into the world of not only 4K, but also the 8K. So these are the various machines available. What are the advantages? High magnification, enhanced depth of field, and a good magnification. It's a good ergonomics. Here you can see the lumbar support is quite good enough and it's an excellent teaching tool. In fact, we use this for our residents training as well. It's nothing but like a glorified whiteboard teaching. So what's the advantage? Definitely it has best visualization. Every details of the step can be explained and can be taught to many people at the same time. So that's future is going to be the Sony HMS 3000 MT. So then we have is the gene therapy, is the adding a missing gene or modifying an existing. So where here we have a VORTI gene, that's the Luxturna, which is carried through the viral vector AAV2. So definitely it's helpful in case of retinitis pigmentosa, LCA, and Fundus albipunctatus. So this is last of few slides is the FCBB, that is the foldable capsular vitreous body. It's made from the biocompatible polymer. The silicone oil could be injected into the capsule. I'll just show the video here so that you can understand it. See here, it's just like a, just fold it, put it in the IOL injector.
Fully lubricate.
And then use the injector, inject it inside into the vitreous cavity. And then it's just like a balloon. It just inflates. And then you can suture it. So practically, there is no silicone oil emulsification in these kind of technologies. So last few slides on the artificial retina, it's of the bioelectronic eye. We all need to know that. And it's basically for the patients who are blind from outer retinal degenerations. So some light residual perception has to be there in these patients. That is, previous history of useful vision has to be there. And this is the external camera and this is the video processing unit. So this is the internal part. I'll just go on to the operative video, which is less than 30 seconds. So this is here we do peritomy, and I'm thankful to my mentor, Dr. Robert Devaney, where we did few of these surgeries together. And here you can see that's the internal coil, which is situated on the supratemporal aspect of the eye. And then this is the microelectrode tray, which is having around 60 microelectrodes. So it's important to do a vitrectomy and also peel the ERM along with this and slowly make an incision, insert the tray inside. These forceps are silicon tipped forceps because any metal forceps can destroy the electronic circuit. And then slowly roll it inside. There are around 5 to 6 engineers around you who will be able to tell you what should be the orientation, 10 degree, 20 degree left, 20 degree right. And then we use a 19 gauge screws that is called as tacks to just fix it. It tucks it, pierces the retina, choroid.
It's my humble request to Dr. Srinivas that you have just already exited.
So this is the last few slides. This is about the photographic, and the only thing about this is it's far away from the visual reality because it gives you only about 20 by 1000. That's the best reported visual acuity. And definitely it has extension, the field of view is only 20 degrees. So these are certain limitations, but definitely we are we have just grown into nowhere where there was no availability at all. So these are the various other MIT device, holographic, AG Germany is also available, and Nano Retina as well. So with this, lastly, I want to tell to all my dear students. So this was a slide of Steve Ballmer, the Nokia phone. So they said we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. So they missed out on learning, changing, and chance of survival. So if we do not update ourselves, if we do not learn about the new technology, then we shall be removed from the competition. So thank you very much. Thank my colleague,
you,
Dr.
sir.
Giriraj.